Welcome to the Manders Mindset podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Welcome to Manders Mindset, where we explore the power of shifting your mindset to shift your life. I'm your host, Amanda Russo. We are going to get into some topics we don't always talk about on Manders Mindset. And I am here today with Mallory Kiersten, and she is dedicated to helping recovering people pleasers and perfectionists reclaim their pleasure and fully express themselves. Through her guidance, her clients dive into profound self-love and acceptance, enabling them to create the most delicious, pleasure-filled lives imaginable. How awesome does that sound? She is a self-love and unstuck-yourself coach, which is so cool. She's a certified erotic blueprint coach, which I had never heard of before. And she's an accelerated evolution practitioner in training. She's also certified in the Sacred Money Archetypes framework and an emotional clearing practitioner of the spiral modality. She focuses on liberating clients from their limitations, helping them reclaim all parts of themselves, especially those aspects they've been ashamed of or have been told are too much. And she is just so much fun, and I am so freaking excited to chat with her. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
So that's an awesome bio, but I always ask my guests who they are at the core. And I know before we started recording, like a dip water bottle and a tiara is kind of your core. But seriously, who would you say you are at the core?
In this moment, I would say I am love at the core. And I truly actually believe that we all are love at the core. So I don't feel like that's something that's like super special and unique to me. But at the core, that is me. As well as a fair amount of chaos and, brattiness and stardust.
I'm very into the sparkles, the glitter. So I love that comment. I really do. Soda. That goes with the tiara. Now, can you take us down memory lane a little bit? Tell us about family dynamic, upbringing, maybe where you grew up, any siblings you had, what it was like being a kid for you, however deep you want to delve into it.
Yeah, so I'm an only child, and both of my parents are actually immigrants from Portugal. So I was I'm part of the first generation of our family lineage to be born in the United States. And so that was always that was a unique experience, I think. So I was only child, very introverted. My mom really encouraged reading. Beauty and the Beast came out. The Disney animated Beauty and the Beast came out when I was like 4 or 3, somewhere around there. And begged my mom, please teach me to read so I could be like, if you're watching this, you can see my bell in the back. You can barely see this, but I have a friend of mine did a cutout art with construction paper of the library scene from that movie. And it's my favorite movie of all time. I learned how to read really young. And I've been a reader, really introverted, and read a lot. My parents split up when I was about 3. My dad went on his own really kind of big healing journey for himself. I remember him also when I was very young handing me, Louise Hay had this line of like coloring books that were also storybooks to teach little ones how to talk to themselves so that they're not afraid of the dark, or to give themselves positive affirmations. My first introduction to like mirror work was actually through one of those stories where you actually look at yourself in the mirror and you tell yourself that you love yourself. And I remember being like 5 years old going, ugh, that's weird. I don't want to do that. but it's something that stuck with me. And those were stories that I had at one time all memorized. They were like books on tape, cassette tapes, because that's how old I am. And I listened to them so much, and I think that was kind of the point. You listen to them so much so that when I was maybe a little bit afraid of the dark, or I was having trouble falling asleep, I would tell myself those stories. So even if I didn't feel comfortable going in the mirror and saying, I love you, which I'm totally comfortable doing now, but that's all stuff that really shaped me.
That is so fascinating to me that you were exposed to that so young. You know, everybody talks about those prime years, 0 to 7, where so much affects what you were intaking. And I've been doing the podcast over a year now, and I have not spoken to anyone who's had parents who did some type of mirror type work with them at that young. That's amazing.
Yeah. And because I was such a reader, I was frequenting the self-help area of bookstores, and it's still this pattern that I have. I'll go to the children's section of a bookstore or a library, and then I go to the self-help area. And, I'm like 10 years old reading about, I don't even remember what I was reading, but I just remember going, what the heck are taxes? Like, it was definitely a self-help book geared for adults. And I was like, what are taxes? I don't understand. But I had it in my head, you know, these were big impacts on me, but there were other big impacts too. There was a lot of tumult, particularly in like the bigger family gatherings. I don't think we ever got through a Christmas or Thanksgiving or an Easter where people weren't arguing. Like the adults were arguing. And that was scary for me as a kid. And so I sort of, for better or for worse, went on this journey of like, I don't want to be like these adults. So I want to fix my problems now before I have my problems. And I become that kind of thing. And I mean, it exposed me to mindset work really, really early. It exposed me to so many of the things that now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's why. That's why I was reading about that then. So it's not such a foreign concept for me now as an adult.
So how old would you say you were when you got into that about?
Yeah, I was trying to read the grown-up books at about 10. But I was also trying to read things like Moby Dick, Jane Eyre. Like I was like, all of my reading tests told me that I was college level reading when I was age 10. And at the time, there wasn't so much out there that catered to younger humans that, like Jane Eyre, for instance. It's like I couldn't comprehend somebody in a mental institution or needing to be in a mental institute. I didn't know what a mental institution was. Like we don't have concepts of this world of adulthood yet. Yet we're reading at college level. So I was trying to be older while I was young, which is probably why I spend so much of my time when I do read now. I'm making my way through the Babysitter's Club right now. Zero shame about it. Like I'm reading the Babysitter's Club for myself right now, and so I spend a lot more time with children's books now as an adult than I ever did as a younger person. It's really funny to me.
Now, you mentioned that the adults in your life were arguing. How did you start approaching your life differently to fix your problems you mentioned before you had them?
I just noticed that there was a lot of misery. And when I talked to people, like when I talked to adults in my family or outside of that, and everybody's talking about this whole cycle of going to work and coming home, and you maybe have the energy to cook dinner and do laundry. And then if you have energy to do anything else, you're collapsing on the couch in front of the TV. And I was like, adulthood sounds really fucking boring. Like really fucking boring. I probably didn't say fucking because I was so, I needed to be proper. Obviously, everything back then. I needed to be a proper lady. But adulthood is boring. And so I think probably when I was about 10 or 11, around that time, I said, I'm not going to, I remember the specific moment. My mom and I were in a bookstore and we were walking around the children's section, and my mom was like, "Oh, I remember reading this book. Wow, I can't believe I forgot about that." And I was like, "I am never going to forget the children's section. I am never like it was really dramatic, but I was like, I'm never going to forget the children's section." And because of that, it's like I feel like I don't remember ever a time in my life where I stopped using my imagination or I stopped being creative. I was always creative in some way, shape, or form. I was like in band in middle school and high school. I did a fair amount of drama also during that time in college, musical theater. Like I did a lot of creative things. And I just feel like that's so important. And if performance art isn't your thing, what are the creative things that you can do? Even if you're just like a creative problem solver. I just always wanted that part of my brain activated, and I worked really hard to do that. It might just look like color coding your spreadsheets in a really pretty pattern. That's creativity.
But you recognize that pretty young. And I can just picture you probably like raising your voice in this bookstore.
Well, in my head, I definitely was. There was a lot of things that I was very internal, again, very introverted, very internal. I didn't communicate a lot of what was going on in my brain, mostly because I wasn't really taught. My dad tried some to try to get me to talk about emotions and talk about feelings and say what I'm thinking. And he realized a lot sooner that the safer that I felt, the more space that I had to feel and think and be and read and whatever, then that stuff would just kind of start naturally coming out. And it did. It took like 25 years, but it did eventually start coming out. But I mean, most of the time, because it wasn't such a normal thing in my family, it's very, my grandfather on my mom's side, for example, he was a rancher. He owned a ranch. So it's that very like stoic, you just like don't talk about it. Like you just don't talk about the deeper things. My grandpa on the other side, he was a soldier and then did more like manual labor stuff as well. And so again, it's that like work hard, conceal, don't feel, don't let it show. So in so many ways, my dad was actually a real cycle breaker for even wanting to initiate the conversations, as clumsy as it was sometimes. And I also like to believe that my stepmom had a lot to do with softening, helping him soften, because she's a very soft, nurturing person that I've been really lucky to have in my life, because not everybody has that. Oh, I'm crying. Yeah, very soft, very nurturing person. And I consider myself really lucky to have that.
That's great. When did she come into your life?
I think I was 8, and I was not super accepting in the beginning, as most kids are. They have the fantasy of like wanting mom and dad to get back together. And I definitely had that. But as an adult looking in now, I'm like, well, that would not have worked. They're two totally different people. If that didn't happen when I was 3, it was going to happen when I was 10. It was just inevitable.
I get it. I like how you mentioned looking back at it as an adult. I have different things I agree with. I don't agree with the way my parents did things. And, I've had to work through a lot of forgiveness with things. But looking at things different, like from the lens of an adult, even from as if they weren't my parents, has helped me look at and reframe that.
Yeah.
But that's great that he started to be a cycle breaker, and at least made that attempt and had less of that rugged masculinity.
Definitely. My dad is, if you believe in astrology and star signs, my dad is a Cancer. So he's a water sign. My mom's a Sagittarius, so fire sign. I'm an Aries. I'm also a fire sign. I don't like to feel stuff either. Well, I mean, that's not true. I totally love to feel it now, but I didn't back then. And yeah, it's just my dad. My dad has always been on the really sensitive side. And actually, something that I really loved about both my parents is that, my mom never stopped. Like, she didn't actually play with Barbies, but she would like collect them. And that brought her so much joy and like American Girl dolls. Like, she still has that like childlike quality. And she loves changing their outfits for all of the different seasons. So like she gets so much joy out of that. And my dad, like, he collects his cars and he's got like he likes to collect trucks with like truck beds so he could put chocolates in them. So he just has like these little trucks all throughout the house with all with chocolate in them. So they both play in their own way. And I think that also impacted me and like how I play as an adult for sure.
That's beautiful. Keeping that childlike self alive. I love that. Have you ever heard of a skip it?
Yes, I had one. Skip it, skip it.
So fact for you. And I've never said this on the podcast. It's super random, but it just made me think of it. I had one growing up and I loved that thing. And I was like having nostalgia a few years back, missing it. And I was talking to my mom and I was like, why'd you get rid of that? She's like, you don't need one of those, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to find one. Well, I found the same exact one on eBay and I bought it. I spent $50 on a skip.
It's probably about the same price it was then because it was probably close to like $15-20 back then. So, hey, great deal. You got a great deal.
And people are like, what is that helping you with? I'm into fitness and they're like, that's not really going to do anything. I'm not doing it for that. It's just a fun, playful thing. It doesn't have to have a purpose. As adults, we lose that and we're so goal-oriented and you have to do this and you have to check the boxes. And it's like, you know what? Maybe for 20 minutes, I just want to jump over this skiffet thing. I don't know what it does. I might fall on my face because I'm not as coordinated when I was younger. But you know what? I'm having fun.
And so this is my brat. And I'd be like, watch me get fit using my skip it. Watch me get really freaking fit. Because like, you're hopping around on one foot, essentially. That's quads, that's hamstrings, that's like all your big muscle groups, essentially. And you get to decide how deep of a squat you go into to get that jump. So watch me get fit with my skip it, people. On a more serious note, usually my response to those types of reaction is like, pleasure is the point.
Enjoy. I love your Instagram handle, by the way. When I saw that, I was like, we are meant to connect. She's the joy goddess. Like, is there any other like synchronicity? Joy goddess. I was like, oh my God, I already feel joyful reading like the name. But like exactly. It doesn't have to be whatever word you want to use, whether you want to call it pleasure, whether you want to call it joy. Like if you're enjoying it, like why does it have to have a specific purpose?
Peace.
It's not harming anybody. Yeah, exactly. I'm not hurting
whoever your
anybody.
note is.
Yeah, so I love that. Have you always embraced your pleasure?
Absolutely not. I think, I don't think any of us is immune to the no pain, no gain. And there is some truth to that. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for something that we want later. I had a pretty interesting relationship with food in my growing years. I've always been a little bit on the bigger side. And, for me, it's like embracing my pleasure now as like an adult. I enjoy food so much more. And my eating patterns haven't actually changed a whole lot, but my health has for the better because I'm not denying myself the pleasure of the moment. And with food as a younger person, it's, this is a bad food. This is a good food. And I finally just realized a few years ago really was when this really landed. It doesn't matter if I'm eating salad or I'm eating cookies, if all I'm doing is feeding myself my own hate. And when that landed, I will enjoy a burger like nobody's business. It is an extremely sensual, borderline sexual experience. Like, it is orgasmic when I get something that I really, really desire. And sometimes I really desire a salad. It's feeding. And the more that I let go of things being about being a certain weight or being a certain size or any of those things, it's like the more that I find that my body just kind of naturally moves in that direction. And it's not hard. So I think that has had just ramifications all around, like positive ones. Because I've also, when it comes to health and fitness, it's like I find the ways that is most pleasurable for my body to move. So I want to do it. So then my body moves more. I had a lot of that programming as a younger person growing up, that like pain now for possible pleasure later. And I'm finding that it doesn't have to be an either or. Like, you get to enjoy every step of the journey on your way to the thing that you want.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said feeding yourself hate. I got chills when you said that, because I have not always been, for the majority of my life, I have not been a fit person. I was overweight all growing up, almost 200 pounds when I was in high school, probably a senior, and I'm short, I'm little. So even more so, like I'm barely 5 feet. So 200 pounds, it's got nowhere to go. And I've gone through all the different things, all the different trials and tribulations with fitness, and I started losing weight, was looking better, was feeling better, but it wasn't fully sticking, not everything, and it wasn't where I wanted to be, and it wasn't until I said something to a complete stranger, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is what I'm internally saying to myself." I was at a get together and I didn't even know this woman, and I was like, fat kid in me just wants to eat these cookies." And I was like, she's like, "Me too. Let's go." And I'm like, "Wait, what did I just say? I don't even know this woman. This is my first time meeting you." And I was literally like, "Okay, let's take a step back, because what did I just say to you?" And she's like, "We're just gonna go eat some cookies." I didn't know, and this was years into my journey, after I've lost and maintained 70 pounds, but it wasn't that much at that point. But I was like, wait, if I am saying this to someone I don't know, because it's internally what I'm saying to myself, whoa, this is affecting how I show up, and I'm not even realizing it. I'm feeding myself hatred, and I don't realize I'm feeding myself this hatred. Like, outside, this persona, like, oh, she's lost a lot of weight, she's going to the gym, she's got this confidence, but it's like, what are you saying in here? And what I was saying in there was awful. It was turmoil. Internally, I was destroying myself, and I didn't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes you wonder, like, what else is there? Like, if that just showed up, what other layers are there?
It really does, because I had no awareness that I was saying that to myself until it came out of my mouth. And I was like, Manda, you don't even know this woman's last name. It's like, not that I need to, but I'm like, I just said something what? And it still blows my mind a little bit, not gonna lie.
Something that needed to be heard and needed to be said, that was just like, had been waiting to be said. Surprise. I don't mean to poke at it and make light of it. That's not what I'm trying to do. But it's just kind of like, oh, surprise. Like,
And no, literally, it needed to come to the surface. Yeah. You mentioned pain now for possible pleasure later. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
yeah, absolutely. So, very, very goal oriented family. And so it was like, I think for most of us, we get the advice from our parents of like, do your homework and then you can play video games, or you can go ride your bike, or whatever the hobby is, you know. And I think it's just, I took that so literally. And then when I took it into adulthood, after I graduated college and I started working, and it's like, oh, crap. The work is never done. Like, you can be done sort of with your work. And when I went into actual work places, like I was a teacher. So we do actually have the benefit of an ending of a school year. So there is time where the work is quote unquote done, but there's still laundry to do. There's still dishes to do. The house needs to be fucking cleaned all the time. It doesn't matter how often you clean it. There's still dirt. I don't understand. There's still shit everywhere. I don't understand. Or maybe that's just me because I'm ADHD. So I've got like piles of like, this is a to-do list pile. This is my craft pile. So I've got all that everywhere. But like, the work is never done. And so we have to kind of like, otherwise we're always going to be working and we're never going to be in pleasure. So we have to actually put our own boundaries into place around like, you know what? No, I'm done. And I think I always had it in my mind as a younger person that it's like, when you achieve the goal, that's when you're going to be happy. And I think a lot of us play that game. It's like, when I have my degree and I don't have to study so hard anymore, I'll be happy. When I reach this weight, I'll be happy. When I meet, you know, my future husband, wife, partner, polycule, I'll be happy. And we play that game. And it's like, there's so much that we miss out on when we could be enjoying every moment.
That's true. You know, I love how you said it, the work's never done. It's so true. You know, like, there's always going to be something to do. You know, I'm a very clean and an organized person and enjoy cleaning, which
I totally enjoy cleaning too. Just not when I'm already tired. Then I get cranky about it.
I get that. But when you said that, it made me think of this really random comment that my mom had said to me years ago. I don't even know how or why this is still in my head. But we were on the phone and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, I just got done sweeping." And she was like, "You know, I feel like you could find something every day that needs to be swept. It's even something as simple and as basic as that. You could find fucking something to sweep up." So like when you mentioned laundry, there was always,
Unless you do the laundry naked, it's always going to be something to wash.
okay, I gotta say this. I never thought I'd say this on a podcast, but one of my ex-boyfriends and I would do laundry naked, and we would get everything washed. We would be walking around the house naked, stripping the beds, putting up. Yes, that is
Because just for a moment, everything is clean. Laundry hack.
I've never said that out loud because I used to think, I was like who does this? Like we're just walking around butt ass naked.
That's awesome. Why wouldn't you share that on a podcast with everybody?
It was so funny because one night we were smoking weed and he came to this revelation and he's like, "I figured out the solution." I was like, "The solution to what?" And he was like, "To how to get ahead of the laundry." Because I had recently moved in and I was like, "How are you going to get ahead of the laundry?" And he's like, "I'm going to wear nothing when I do it because then I will complete it. You can't complete something if you still have another thing to do." And I'm like, "That is true." And then we started doing naked laundry.
Okay. And how much fun was naked laundry?
It was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of things though that people are like, "Oh, that's interesting," that make people bat their eyes.
I have a theory about that. My theory about that is people who bat their eyes, there's a little teeny part of them, however small, that wishes they thought of it first. It's just a theory. Maybe somebody out there wants to do an official study. It's a hypothesis. We could test the hypothesis.
That could be true. I think it could even tie into like, or somebody, why they don't feel comfortable enough to do whatever it is. To like let their guard down, to embrace the pleasure. You know what I mean? I want to backtrack a tad. I really liked how you mentioned as well about, well, waiting to be happy when we hit this goal, when we have this next big thing. And so many people say that, which I don't know if everybody realizes is how true it is. You know, I got my bachelor's in legal studies, and now I didn't get a job in a law office for longer than I would have liked. And I remember people talk about writing things as if it has already happened. And that's a way of manifestation, a way of to call in things. And I used to write down in my journal for every morning, I work in a law office, blah, blah, blah. I would just, it was vague. My first opportunity in a law office, I started working there part-time. And then it was in my head, once I'm in a law office Monday through Friday, that's it. So then I changed it. I was even more specific with what I was writing. And then fast forward, I finally got that probably about 2 years total time from post-graduation college to getting it. And then I enjoyed it and it was good. But I was like, And then you get there and it's like, oh, okay. This is what it's like to be a paralegal. Okay. Cool. I don't know that I...
Cool, but not cool.
Literally. So why do you think people then get there and don't have that sense of joy?
Because the super secret that nobody tells us is that it's not usually the thing that we say that we want. What we want is, you know, in your case with the law office, it's like maybe you wanted, oh, I have this beautiful sense of structure. My life feels organized because I know that I show up from this time to this time every single day. I have financial security. It's less about the law office and more about how we feel, how we think the thing is going to make us feel. So I have, you know, a friend who's like looking to buy a house right now. And I know some of her like standards for that around how big it is and that kind of thing. It's not about the bigness of the house. It's about how having the big house means that she can have all the friends over all the time. And that makes her feel loved and abundant and whatever her feelings are about that. She feels joyful being able to have all of her friends in this big house. But it's not about the big house. She probably could be like also really happy in an apartment that has lots of seats so that she still can have, you know, like that's actually a bad example. Maybe you should edit that part out. But my point is that it's not about the thing. It's about what the thing represents and how we think it's going to make us feel. So my example is like, I really desire a new car. I'm not being super specific about it. Maybe I could be more specific about it. But what I want from that car is a feeling of peace as I'm driving on the road, because I know everything is in really great working order and I feel safe. And I know this car is going to get me from point A to point B. I have that security about it. And it just drives so smooth. And it makes the commute to wherever I'm going that much more pleasurable because it's just smooth and awesome. But I haven't said anything about like what type of car I want because it's not actually about that. It's about how I want to feel when I'm driving it.
That makes a lot of sense. I get what you're saying there. I gotta say, I'm really, really glad I've gotten better at shutting up and interrupting the guest less, because I really thought you were going to say it's about the journey, and that's not what you said. It's about how you want to feel.
And the journey was awesome too.
Everybody and their mother says it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Like, I'm big into quotes, and that's something I've heard so often in many areas of life, which I understand it is about the journey as well, but I really like how you mentioned the feeling, because it's not just the journey. You could have this feeling doing multiple different things, whether if it's fitness, doing multiple different fitness activities, whether it's like sex and have different types of sex could give you this, you know what I'm saying? But be different. And even with the car, like you could have that smooth feeling, safe feeling with two different completely vehicles, you know?
And I could totally have that feeling with the vehicle that I have now. It hasn't actually given me much reason to not feel safe and secure driving it. So I could be feeling those feelings now. It's a choice. It's an option.
Everything is a choice. Oh, it's so true. Oh my gosh. So, how did you discover Erotic Blueprint? Where did this realm of life for you come in? You weren't always embracing your pleasure. You started embracing, like, how did you discover this? Wait,
So I will just start straight off by saying that becoming an erotic blueprint coach was not on the bucket list for me. Like, it was not in my mentor. I had just completed a money course that she had been doing. And I was like, I'm just going to like fix my mindset about money, and I'm going to just go in the world and be abundant and whatever. And then she offered this course and I was like feeling really called to work with her, but I wasn't sure that that was the right thing. I was like, so I messaged her and I was just like, I don't even know why I want this, but something's telling me that I should want this. And so I'm telling you that I want this, but I'm also not going to talk about sex.
would have Erotic Blueprint before you saw her offering this? Did you?
I had not. And
Okay.
so the erotic blueprints were not come up with by my mentor, but actually by one of her mentors, Jaya. And it's essentially a typing system. If you're familiar with the 5 love languages, it's the 5 languages for sex, intimacy, passion, pleasure, essentially. So there are 5 erotic blueprints, just like 5 love languages. Do you want me to talk about them?
Yeah.
Like what they are? Okay.
Yeah, if you can, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah. I love talking about this. Like, I'm such a nerd about it now. And it's so hilarious to go from that person that was like, I'm not talking about sex, but I want your program, to now I'm a certified erotic blueprint coach. And now all I want to do is talk about pleasure. So, wild. Just wild. So the first erotic blueprint is the energetic blueprint. And energetics are turned on by spaciousness, anticipation, and tease. So with energetics, less is more. So superpowers are, because they're so energetically sensitive, they can like orgasm without even being touched. They can like make eye contact with their partner from across the room and just go into ecstasy. It's pretty cool. Pretty freaking cool. And they make really intuitive lovers because they can kind of just have this natural sense about what the other needs. And it's really beautiful. And the shadow side, every single one has superpower and shadows. But the shadow is that because of that sensitivity, if too much is happening too fast, they can actually shut down. Or they can actually lose their pleasure like once touch has been initiated. So they might love this like hover of the hand on their face. They can feel the warmth and they can feel the energy. And then it's like as soon as the hand touches, you're like, and then the pleasure's gone. Like it's the almost touch. It's the like, oh, that anticipation. So that's the energetic. The energetic in my life, the first thing that I changed in my life when I realized I'm a different blueprint, but I have a lot of energetic in me. So my first thing that I did when I wasn't talking about sex and intimacy and passion was I looked at my calendar and I went, I need more space. And so most of us with time management were taught to like schedule everything out to the 5-minute increment. And that totally works for some people, but I realized it wasn't working for me. It was causing me to shut down, as an energetic does when they feel overwhelmed by too much in their life or too much happening too fast in a sexual situation. I just deleted everything out of the calendar that wasn't like an appointment at a client session, like something that said I needed to be somewhere at a specific time. Everything else got deleted. And the breath that I got to experience, the openness, the peace that I got to experience just with that one adjustment. So, yeah. So when I say the blueprints apply to life, they apply to life. Inside and outside of the bedroom, they are a lifestyle. The second blueprint is the sensual blueprint, and sensuals are turned on by all of the senses. So they're the people that have plants everywhere, or they like pretty backgrounds in their places. I'm seeing your beautiful, pretty background that you got going on. They tend to like their places, their spaces clean because they bring the beauty to sex. So in a sexual situation, they may have like yummy smelling candles burning, like chocolates on the nightstand, very white in the background, rose petals scattered, but not like scattered too much because then that's just a mess. But enough to make the space beautiful. The superpower of this blueprint is that pleasure is a multisensory experience. Like for me, when I have really good food, you will know it because it'll be in my mouth and I will be going, If you've ever had like really good food and you've had a mouthgasm, you may be a sensual blueprint. The shadow side is that sensuals can get really in their head. So sort of like that example that I had about the rose petals, but oh my gosh, if it's too many rose petals, then it's a mess. It's like, oh, here's this beautiful environment. And then all of a sudden you're in your head about the mess that's being created right now. There's undies on the floor, or candy wrappers on the floor now, and you like, then where does your pleasure go? You get into your head and then you lose out on the pleasure. I've got my plants everywhere. I have a really super soft comfort. I wear clothes that I let my body in the morning tell me, we want to wear this today. Let's go wear this today. My body tells me what's going to feel good on my skin. Essentials are all about the environment. All about the environment. So, lifestyle, y'all. The third blueprint is the sexual blueprint. The sexual blueprint is turned on by all the things that we tend to think of when we talk about sex. Nudity, promise of an orgasm, penetration, all of that stuff. The stuff that they teach us in sex ed, if you were lucky enough to have at least a little bit of a sex education growing up. The nuts and bolts. The superpower of this blueprint is that they don't actually need a highly erotic context to experience turn on and arousal. They can just go 0, not turned on at all, to 500. Now I'm extremely turned on. And it doesn't take much. For them, sex is really simple, doesn't require a whole lot. I personally believe that because of that simplicity, there's more of a playful, lighter, or there can be a more playful, lighter energy to this blueprint. The shadow side of this is that sort of what we talked about earlier is getting so focused on the goal, in this case, the goal being orgasm, that they miss out on the journey. They miss out on everything that's available for them right now because they're so busy thinking about the thing that's ahead. And the other thing for this blueprint too is that if orgasm doesn't happen, they can often experience shame, like they somehow quote unquote failed. Shame is kind of a part of all of these in their own way, and each blueprint has a different flavor of shame that can come up because this is such vulnerable territory for most of us. And I would be surprised. I have yet to encounter a person who was just like, I've never experienced any kind of sexual shame. We all have been in one way or another. So that's the sexual blueprint. The kinky blueprint is turned on by what is taboo for you. So a lot of times people hear me say the word kinky and they automatically assume, oh, it's BDSM. And it's not that. It can include that, but it's whatever is taboo for you, whatever pushes the edges for you. So the example that I hear used all the time is like if you're so used to having sex with the lights off, having sex with the lights on could be really kinky for you. Like, it's something different. It's way more vulnerable. The lights are on. Oh boy, I can't hide. That can be really edgy for some people. And superpowers of this blueprint are endless creativity. And they tend to also be really, really great at consent conversations because of the edges that kink can push. It's important to have that container and that safety whenever you're engaging in any kind of kinky play, whether it's BDSM or lights on. Because if you turn on the lights without somebody's consent, that could totally shut them down, right? It's not something that you talked about. Yeah. Anyway, shadows are kinkies can kind of get, while they have this capacity for like endless creativity, they also can get into a rut. They find something, a fetish or a pathway that quote unquote works, and then they get stuck in needing that every single time. And then shame for this blueprint shows up in, depending on what the desire is, like, this is really edge pushing. This is a really edge pushing blueprint. And so shame, depending on what the desire or if there's a fetish, whatever that desire may be. So kinky blueprint out in the wild, for me, looks an awful lot like, how can I safely disrupt the rules? How can I safely push the edges? And I'm emphasizing safely, because for me, it can be just as little as, I was all throughout my life, I always followed the rules and I always did everything I was supposed to. So you'll catch me going in the outdoor at the grocery store almost all of the time. Because the door says out, I am going in. I'm going to break this rule. I'm going to be rebellious. So, it's so silly. And yet it's just a way that I embrace my kinky in my life. Another thing is the fact that I'm even an erotic blueprint coach, especially considering I was a school teacher before. Like, I had all these like really quote unquote proper things growing up that now this is part of how I make my living is through erotic blueprints. And I'm like, wow, this feels like a pretty big rebellion to me. My existence is a kinky existence. I feel rebellious just existing. I didn't talk about sexual out in the wild because we kind of talked a lot about that actually earlier on in our conversation about the goal-oriented and missing out on things. And that's the sexual blueprint being lived by most of us, not realizing. So, anywho. The last one is the Shapeshifter blueprint. So if you've been kind of all throughout going like, oh, that might be me. Oh, that might be me. Oh, that might be me. You may be a shapeshifter because shapeshifters not only want all of the other blueprints to be addressed, but they actually need it to feel fully fulfilled. And so superpowers for a shapeshifter is that they are well versed in all of the blueprints. That's just something that comes naturally to them because they need it all for themselves to feel fully fed. And the shadow side of that, though, is that they can resort to people pleasing in the bedroom. So if, their partner is primarily sensual, they have the ability to shape shift to being essential to please the partner, but then it's sort of the equivalent of you can like burgers, but if you had burgers every single day for every meal, you'd kind of get sick of it. And that's a challenge for the shapeshifter, is they like all the sensual things or they like all the energetic things, but if it's not mixed with the others, they end up feeling starved. We call that feeling starved for more. So, and that's actually another shadow of the shapeshifter, because the way that shame can show up for a shapeshifter is in this feeling like they're too much, like they're demanding too much of their partner because they desire all of it.
Okay.
I threw a lot of information at you. Are you breathing?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Would you say people can change their erotic blueprint, or it can change? Not like they purposely change it, but would you say experiences, lifetime, whatever could change these?
Oh, absolutely. When I first started the work, I took the Erotic Blueprint quiz, and it was telling me that I was primarily kinky, which I've shared with you kind of like how my kinky sort of shows up in my life. But as I've done the work and I've really, sensual was my lowest, if you can believe it, with how much I've talked about food on this podcast. Like, how could I not have more sensual in my blueprint? But that was the one it was telling me I had the least access to. And as we do the work and as we experiment, like that can totally shift. I went from more of a kinky sexual into more of an energetic sensual shapeshifter. I mean, I am a shapeshifter, but it's like I tend to lean more toward energetic sensual. And for most of us, it's just because we don't realize that those are options. Because we're taught that sex is this one thing. And when we can find how the other languages or how the other blueprints play, it absolutely can shift over time. Most of the people that I've talked to that have done this work have shifted a lot over time.
Okay.
It's always flowing. It's always moving. There's always something new to play with or new to discover. And to the question about like, can we choose like a different blueprint? We can always choose to expand into, there's actually so many tools and techniques for each blueprint, depending on which one you want to expand into. And there's always room for expansion.
No, that is so fascinating. And I love how you explained the life portion of each, the superpower of each, the shadow of each. You explained that very, very well. Now, how would you suggest people utilize the superpower versus the shadow of their blueprint?
Huh. I would say that step one probably just has to do with belief that the superpower can be embodied, whatever the superpower is. So you might be an energetic who hasn't had the experience of orgasms without being touched. Pretty cool superpower to have. But if you're so used to overriding yourself for somebody else, that really compromises an energetic's safety. So I guess the other step one is cultivating safety in whatever it is that you're wanting to explore and whatever it is that you're wanting to expand upon, to make the superpowers and be more out of the shadow. I don't know that there's a way to completely be out of the shadow. I think there's a way of getting to a place where it's like, oh, I'm recognizing I'm in shadow right now. Surprise. And just having the recognition, having the language to be able to name it, to be able to go, oh, you know what? I don't want to play here right now. I want to go more to this like superpower side. Yeah. Safety and belief, I would say, would be like the top things for that.
I like that you said safety. You know, I think that's key to any type of pleasure, whether it's sexual pleasure, pleasure in life, pleasure in career, pleasure in anything. Like, if you don't have that basic level of safety, if you don't feel safe, you can't feel pleasure. Your body won't let its guard down to feel the ability to embrace the pleasure, you know?
Yeah. And because your body is literally, when you're in fight flight, your body, like your brain, your body, everything is signaling life or death situation, whether you're actually running from a tiger or answering an email from your boss. Like our bodies react the same way. Step one is calm your nervous system, whatever that looks like for you. If that's breath, I love my weighted blanket. I was so resistant to trying it, but I love that thing for when I just feel stressed or overwhelmed or whatever. It's just like, oh, I'm being hugged by the universe right now. And it feels amazing. That usually will do the trick for me. Super basic breath for me is just in for 4, out for 8, just making the exhale twice as long as the inhale. And it's like, okay, I can come back. And maybe this is because I'm essential, but something to help bring safety is actually, this is from, I forget the author's name, but his book is Positive Intelligence. And he talks about meditation being something as simple as engaging one of your 5 senses for 10 seconds. So that could be like, you have such a beautiful background. Like if I wanted to do, it's called a PQ rep, positive intelligence rep, PQ. Like if I wanted to engage my sense of sight, I would pick one of those beautiful pictures that you have around you and like go into that purple, go deeply into that purple. Nothing else exists right now except for this beautiful purple that's right there. And do that for 10 seconds. And it just like starts that process of rewiring the brain so that you can invite more pleasure in. Another super easy one for touch is like putting your thumb and forefinger together, like you're rolling a toothpick, and just really being in that sense of touch. Like, oh, I can feel right now, like the side of my thumb, like really needs some moisturizer. But like, I'm being really in the touch right now. Like, so those are just some simple ways if you're looking to cultivate more safety so that you can invite in more pleasure, because the more pleasure that you can invite in, the safer you feel. Might as well be in a really cool one instead of like a downward one.
So, anybody listening to us, they hear you talking about these erotic blueprints and they are intrigued to find out what those is and how to go more about this. What is your suggestion for them? First step. How can they determine it and start embracing the superpowers?
Yeah. So there is an erotic blueprint quiz. There is a free version that'll give you, I think it's like 10 questions or something like that, that'll give you an overview, like a really basic overview. But there is a paid version that offers something a lot more in depth. You'll actually get an email with a PDF booklet with your pleasure profile. It'll break down your percentages of each blueprint, and it'll dive more deeply into your primary blueprint, because that's always a really good place to start if you know that you're really strong in a certain area. And it'll provide you with things that you can do to feed your blueprint, practical steps. It's all there. That's a really great way to start. Yeah, if you're wanting to go further, like you already know, like you want to go all the way in, there's the Erotic Blueprint Breakthrough course, which it's 8 modules. They are jam-packed with, because a common question that I get is people get really excited and they want to take the quiz. They take the quiz and then their lover takes the quiz. And they find out they have 2 completely different blueprints. And they go, particularly sexuals and energetics. So energetics who need things to be super duper slow, and sexuals who are turned on really, really fast, they always find each other and like get married and stuff. I have no idea, but it does happen. But what that course does is it helps you understand each other's blueprints. And there's actually a module about speaking the blueprints. So using language of the other blueprints to speak to each other's turn-ons, even though you may have totally different pathways to turn on. It's really good. But, you know, what I do highly, highly recommend, whether it's with me or if it's with another coach, I highly recommend getting one-on-one support. So there is an option to do one-on-one coaching with me and get the course. We would go through the course, you know, together in our one-on-ones. And stuff will come up and you likely will need somebody to talk to about the things that are coming up. So you could do the course on its own. Highly, highly recommend having a coach to be with you so that you, number one, complete the course. Completion rate goes through the roof usually when there's one-on-one support, but also just so you have somebody there. I know for me, my whole resistance in the beginning of the version of me who I don't want to talk about sex was because I actually had so much trauma that I wasn't ready to look at yet. And so I was working with my mentor at the time. I ended up getting a therapist on board as well. It was immensely helpful to have the one-on-one support with my therapist, and I had group support with my mentor all at the same time. It was immensely helpful in pulling me through that journey so that I could move out of that fire flight that we talked about, cultivate that safety, and get to the place where my life is pleasure.
You know, I've been doing the podcast over a year now, so I've spoken to so many coaches, and there is a coach for everything, honestly, and I've learned that. But I gotta say, I would think something like, whether it's sex, whether it's erotic blueprint, whatever realm in that area would be one of the type of areas you'd need or want coaching the most, because there's so much shame around it, because like you said, every single person has experienced some sort of sexual shame, whatever, even if it's not actual sex, but something around the sexual experience. They've experienced it. And it's not talked about a lot. Is there anything you don't want me to ask, you don't want me to talk about? Always ask that. It's just a respect thing in me. And other than finances, only thing I've heard people tell me, about my sex life, my love life, about my partner. Is one woman got divorced, now she's seeing a woman. I don't want to talk about that. Fine. It's money or sex that people don't talk about.
Nailed it on the head.
You know, we all have some sort of shame around it, like, you know, so I think even more so, the things that society shames more so are the things that it's even more beneficial to have support with, whether you call that a coach, whether you call that a mentor, whatever that is for you, because stuff's going to come up. And then when you're not talking to your friends and you're not talking to your family, then what?
Yeah.
You know, like I say all the time, like, life gets hard, it's gonna throw shit at you, and like everybody and their brother mentions support and coaching and having people, like, the unbiased opinion, which I think is phenomenal. But even more so, like, people are not likely to have the sex conversation with their friends. Like, okay, maybe you've got one best friend you talk to, but there's probably not a lot of people. I talk to all of my friends about fitness. I don't talk to all my friends about sex.
Mm-hmm.
Even my friends who are not into fitness, even my friends who don't go to the gym, my fitness area of my life, it comes up. Not like every day, all the time, but it comes up. there are plenty of people in my life I don't talk about sex to, or I don't talk about money. It's those two.
Can I share a super secret? It took sex for every single one of us to be here. In case you didn't know. You're welcome for that little tidbit. So, like, there's a pretty huge portion of the population that does it. And every single one of us has to engage with money. And part of the reason I got the Sacred Money Archetypes certification as well was because I recognized that too, is that it's either sex or money or both. That's super fun. But all of the work that I do and all of the work that I've done for myself has been about reaching this place of like super self-acceptance, whether it's how you show up in the bedroom or how you show up with your money. And it's all a journey. We're not going to get it right on the first try. If there is even such thing as right, which I have questions about. So I think there's such thing as right for you, but whatever amorphous standard that we have out there about what is right, that doesn't exist, I don't think.
Yeah. How was the transition from being someone and growing up being so proper to being an erotic blueprint coach? Was that like a challenge accepting it yourself and other people accepting this about you now?
Not really, actually. It felt so natural, actually, to kind of, once I was kind of doing the work for myself already, and it felt really natural to move into becoming a coach. Because what I noticed is that knowing about the blueprints, I would listen to the way that some of my clients were talking, and I was like, I bet she's a sensual. So let me assign some homework that has to do with what we talked about in our session that might help ignite her sensual. Before I was even a coach, before I even was considering I'm going to go into the coaching program. And I was just like, okay, this feels like a logical next step. Let me do this. And it did make for a little awkward conversation with my mom, but she was actually pretty accepting. The challenge was what I made it, was in my brain was like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to think, I don't know, whatever I was making up in my head. But it was totally not true. So thank you, brain, for keeping me safe, but not needed.
That's amazing, though. I wasn't sure if you would have struggled a little bit with like the people pleasing tendency and remaining quote unquote proper. That's great, though, that you didn't.
Yeah, I think probably more of the challenge was just navigating. But by the time I was going through the coaching program, I had been out of the classroom for 6 or 7 years. So I think that was a little bit more of my, like, who do I show up as? Because I had this Facebook page that was, you know, all of my teacher friends and like whatever. And I'm like, surprise.
How that?
Fine. It totally fine. And I think that was a little bit more of the challenge, was making that transition from like school teacher to, I went copywriter for a little bit, just as I was getting my land legs in the coaching industry. Yeah. And then it went from there.
Yeah, because that's a shift. What ages did you teach?
I taught middle school, 8th grade. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it.
I'm sure you did. I'm just also thinking of even you've got these like middle schoolers going through puberty and that time frame. Okay.
It's really interesting. It was my favorite time in my life growing up, actually, was middle school. I know that's the face I usually get, but here's why. Because that was a time where it was like, I got to try everything. I got to do everything. I got to be in band. I got to be in winter percussion. I got to play volleyball for a season. I got to be in drama. I got to do it all. And then it's like, once you get into high school, you have to start kind of making choices, because you can't be missing volleyball practice all the time to go to band practice and vice versa. And everything's all overlapped at the same time. So I loved middle school personally. So to me, it was a no-brainer to be a middle school teacher. they're just fascinating at that age, because it's like they want, they're kind of teenagers, but there's still enough little kid in them that they like still kind of want your approval, and they want their gold stars, but they don't want anybody to know that they want their gold stars, but they totally want their gold stars. You know what I mean? Like, it's just fun. I don't think I ever fully grew up out of middle school, to be perfectly honest.
That's an interesting comparison you had between middle school and high school, because you could do all the things in middle school versus you couldn't in high school. And it's only interesting to me because I had almost the opposite experience, because
Oh, interesting.
yeah, my middle school was a private Catholic school. I started going there in preschool mainly because it was the only school that was open longer days, and my mom worked and she didn't have anybody to get me at 11 a.m. So I was there preschool till 8th grade. But the only extracurricular was basketball. The town that we were in was a different town than I lived in. And I did not want to play with the kids from the town I lived in because I didn't know them. I was like, I ain't playing with them. I wanted to play for even the public school of where I was. And they're like, we went and tried to sign me up. They're like, you can't do that. So I went to high school and I was doing everything. If I could do it, I was doing it. And my mom was so mad. She's a saint, but like, they had indoor lacrosse to help you prep for the lacrosse season. Well, I was going to do this. We buy all the stuff, spend $200 on lacrosse gear. It was great. I didn't play lacrosse come the regular season. Then I played softball because I was trying everything. My mom was like, Amanda, you're not even play. So I never was on the actual lacrosse team because it was like pre-indoor lacrosse. Like, it wasn't actual. Yeah. Yeah. But I did everything. Yearbook
It was like
club,
the
drama
training.
club.
Like, yeah.
Yes. But yes, I did almost everything. And each year I switched. One fall, I did cheerleading. One fall, I did volleyball. I would always switch. One year they had dare ball, which was like basketball, but it was a little less serious. Did that one year. I did it all.
How
I did it all.
fun.
I ran for treasure. They didn't award me treasure. And now my high school class kind of sucks. So I'm taking matters into my own hands, and I'm planning a 10-year reunion. Fun.
For you. I will say I have one thing that I wish I would have tried in middle school, and I may have continued it into high school. I'm not sure, but I do wish I would have tried cheer. Tried it my first semester in college, but I was a music major. I ended up having to quit because all the basketball games that we were supposed to be cheering at were on the same nights as concerts for wind ensemble. So I had to make the choice again. Hated it, but I wouldn't trade all that learning that I did, and being able to throw another human up in the air is pretty cool.
No, it is. So I've asked a lot of guests this, not all the guests, but have you ever experienced a big aha moment where something shifted and you were like, oh, okay.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, there've been so many, and I can't remember what was going on in that session with my mentor that led to this point, but I had this moment of like, wow, this person that I thought I was supposed to be, it's not who I want to be, number one. And it's essentially everybody else putting their shit on me. None of that is mine. And oh my gosh, I actually really love the person who's here. The person who actually is here. That is me. And when I had that big aha moment, that shifted everything. Because now everything is this playful new discovery. I feel like I'm back in middle school where it's like I'm getting to just try all these different things, and maybe I like this, or maybe all these things that I thought I didn't like. Maybe they actually are a part of me. And it's created this real play with how I go about life, because everything just feels like play. I gave myself the space yesterday to just walk around a craft store. I went up and down every single aisle just to see if anything spoke to me. And I walked out with some Hello Kitty charms that I think I'm going to turn into earrings. But I got a little confused about what else I needed to buy in order to make earrings happen. But I got the charms. And I got a little crochet kit where I can make little crochet animals. And I was like, because I was never the artistic in that way, not visual art kid of my cousins, but both of the girl cousins, I have one on my dad's side and one on my mom's side. They have always been super crafty and artistic. And so I grew up with the story of that's not me. Well, this is an area of quote unquote, that's not me that I'm getting to explore for myself right now. Maybe I actually am pretty crafty and I just didn't know. And I shut myself down.
I love all of that. Wow. That's amazing.
Let's talk about money. Well, we talked about sex. Let's talk about money.
I am so down for that. And we can dive more into that certification you got because I would love to, but also we have already been chatting for an hour and a half. And I know that it was.
Yeah. Surprise.
And he was the one guest I forgot to even say before him, do you got a time limit?
I'm getting hungry. So we've got about 10 minutes before I turn into a monster.
No. Have you heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
Yes.
Love him. Big fan. He's got a podcast. It's called On Purpose. I haven't heard every episode, so I don't know if he does this in every episode. But he's got 2 ending segments that he ends it with. And I loved them. So I started incorporating them to my podcast. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
First segment is the many sides to us. And there's 5 questions, and they got to be answered in 1 word each. We laugh after the good. Okay. The many sides to us. What is 1 word someone who was meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Playful.
What is 1 word that someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you as?
Weird.
What is 1 word you'd use to describe yourself?
Silly.
What is 1 word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you as?
Immature.
What is 1 word you're trying to embody right now?
Luxury.
The second segment is the final 5, and these can be answered in up to a sentence. Okay. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
Follow the threads of pleasure. It'll never steer you wrong.
What is the worst advice you've heard or received?
Work now, play later.
Why is that the worst?
Because the work is never done unless you do the laundry naked.
I'm so curious if anyone's ever done that or if that is just have you, being an erotic coach, no one's ever told you they've done that before?
There are a lot of things that people have told me that they do naked, and unfortunately, laundry has not been one of them. I only done it a couple times because then I run into the problem of where do I sit?
You won't sit on your couch or your bed naked?
Well, my bed, but then it's
why don't you sit on the couch naked?
Doesn't that dirty the sheets?
Are you dirty?
I don't know. What if I sweat?
Well, we would literally sit on the couch, butt ass naked, watch TV, or go about doing whatever. I didn't have a podcast at the time, but I would just be on social media, sitting on my phone, butt ass naked.
Yeah. So work now, play later. And what I find in adulthood is that when we don't actually schedule the play, it will never make its way on our schedule.
That makes a lot of sense. Because there's always something else we could do, even if it's something as basic as a chore, like we mentioned. What is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Status.
Okay. If you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone was reading it, what would you want it to say?
I would want it to say that I had a hand in creating a better world because I helped guide people back to themselves, back to their love for themselves, so that they're also out, not so that. That's enough in and of itself, is coming back to love for you, for no other reason other than you, because you're worthy of that. And the side effects tend to be that we navigate the world with so much more kindness and compassion, and that filters out into communities and out and out and out into an entire world. That's what I would want it to say.
If you could create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
Everyone would have to follow. That's hard because that feels like a free will violation right there. So I'm like, ah. Okay. So the law being that everybody who chooses to and wants it has access to services, coaches, therapists, guides to help them in their own personal development. And
why?
we need to choose it. We need to choose it. If we're not choosing it, if it's being forced on us, it's just more rules that you're following to break away from the rules that you were following as a younger person and heal from.
Go ahead.
Oh, I would want everybody to have access to some kind of personal development, should they choose it. Because I think it's so valuable. We don't know how much we fight ourselves until we actually get to experience the relief of not fighting ourselves every step of the way. And it opens us up to more creativity. And again, back to that legacy piece of kindness.
I love that. I really love that. Now, where can listeners connect with you if they want to get in touch and chat with you?
Yeah. So my website is MalloryKiersten.com. That is a way to connect with me. I am most active on Facebook because that is where millennials my age hang out. And that is Mallory.Kiersten.888. And I'm the Joy Goddess on Instagram and TikTok.
Awesome. Well, I will link all of that in the show notes. And before we fully wrap up, I do like to just give it back to the guest. Any final words of wisdom, but just anything you want to leave the listeners with?
Sprinkle pleasure on your life like glitter. Because if you've ever done anything with glitter, that will get everywhere.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. And yes, we've got to do this again and chat money. Any shame around that? Let's do it. I'm so down. I'm so down. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Manders Mindset. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to that really fun and engaging episode with Mallory. I wanted to share a few of my biggest takeaways. One thing that really stuck out to me was how Mallory talked about how we have been taught to put off our pleasure or our joy for something else. And that whole work now, play later mindset, Mallory is done with it. And you should be done with it too. Mallory talked about how pleasure is the point. Whether you're enjoying savory food, whether it's a creative project you're doing, whatever it is, pleasure is the whole point. It doesn't need to be something that you quote unquote earn once you finish whatever it is. Because that's the thing. Even as Mallory and I emphasized, the work is never done. Whether it's sweeping, whether it's working on your business, whether it's editing a podcast, there will always be something to work on. Do not push off your joy and pleasure. Honestly, that reminder hit me hard. The work is never fully done. So why wait to enjoy life? You'll be waiting forever. Mallory also introduced me to the concept of erotic blueprints. You can also find the link in the show notes to take the quiz to find out your own erotic blueprint. But you can think of them as the love languages, but for intimacy and pleasure, which makes so much sense. And it's not just about sex or sexual desires. It's about understanding yourself at the core and what lights you up inside and outside of the bedroom. Learning this can shift the way you approach your whole life, from your relationships to your career to how you schedule your day. And the biggest aha moment for me was when Mallory said, if you're feeding yourself hate, it doesn't matter if you're eating a salad or a cookie. And I was like, whew, whoa, let that sink in. That was a big reminder to watch how we talk to ourselves. As I've shared on a few different episodes, I used to tell myself inside my head and call myself the inner fat kid. Saying this shameful thing to myself affected me. It affected how I showed up in relationships. It affected my mindset. It affected how I scheduled my days. It affected what I did. It affected who I spent time with. It affected it all. This was a big reminder for me and all of us that if you're shaming yourself through life, you are never going to feel truly good. Even if you accomplish things, they're not going to feel like accomplishments, no matter what you accomplish. So here's what I want you to think about. Where can you add more joy into your life right now? What's one thing you can do just because it feels good? Start there. I hope this episode helped you rethink how you approach not only pleasure, but everything in your life. And if you're ready to take the erotic blueprint quiz and find out your erotic blueprint, that is in the show notes. You can also connect with Mallory on her website or on social media. Her information is in the show notes as well. And thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Manders Mindset. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate it if you left a rating, left a review, and shared this episode with anyone you think would benefit from hearing it. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave me a comment, subscribe so you are updated on when the next episode releases. And as a reminder, Manders Mindset is going on hiatus from February 2nd to March 10th, and we will return with a new episode on March 10th. I am heading off to Bali for the month of February for an intensive sound healing training. We will be back with new episodes Monday, March 10th. Thanks, guys. Until next time. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.